Taiwan is an island of striking contrasts. It rests quietly in the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, a green jewel adorned with towering mountains and lush tropical forests. From a distance it appears serene, a solitary outpost between the East China Sea, the Philippine Sea, and the South China Sea. Its shape is often likened to a sweet potato, a humble yet vital crop that has sustained its people for generations. This island, though small on a world map, holds a significance far greater than its size suggests. It is a place where dramatic landscapes meet bustling modern cities, and where ancient traditions coexist with cutting-edge technology. The story of Taiwan is as dynamic and varied as its terrain, shaped by the powerful forces of nature and the relentless currents of human history. The formidable central mountain range runs down its spine like a great dragon, dividing the island into a rugged, mountainous east and a gentle, fertile west. These mountains have historically served as a natural barrier, protecting the island's interior and preserving the unique cultures of its indigenous peoples. On the western plains, life has flourished for centuries. It sits just 180 kilometers off the coast of southeastern China, a proximity that has defined its history for centuries. This narrow body of water, the Taiwan Strait, has been both a bridge and a barrier, a channel for migration, trade, and cultural exchange, but also a line of defense and a source of political tension. Long before the arrival of European ships or Chinese settlers, Taiwan was home to a rich tapestry of indigenous cultures. These were the island's first inhabitants, peoples of Austronesian descent whose ancestors are believed to have begun settling here over 6,000 years ago. They were skilled seafarers and farmers, living in harmony with the island's diverse ecosystems. From the coastal plains to the high mountain valleys, dozens of distinct tribes, each with its own language, customs, and beliefs, flourished across the land. Their societies were built on deep connections to the land, their ancestors, and the spiritual world that surrounded them. Anthropologists and linguists believe that Taiwan may be the ancestral homeland, or Urheimat, of the entire Austronesian language family, suggesting that ancient Taiwanese seafarers embarked on one of the greatest human migrations in history, spreading their language and culture across the oceans. The voices of these early inhabitants still echo across the island today, preserved in the traditions of their descendants. For centuries, these indigenous groups lived in relative isolation. However, their seclusion was not absolute. There is evidence of limited contact with Chinese fishermen and traders from the nearby mainland, a far cry from the large-scale migrations and colonial enterprises that would later transform the island forever. The 17th century marked a dramatic turning point in Taiwan's history. The island was suddenly thrust onto the world stage. European naval empires began to venture into the waters of East Asia. For these ambitious mariners from Spain and the Netherlands, Taiwan was an attractive prize. It was strategically located along the trade routes between China, Japan, and Southeast Asia. The Dutch were the first to establish a lasting foothold. In 1624, the Dutch East India Company, or VOC, built a fortress named Fort Zeelandia on a small peninsula near modern-day Tainan, in the southwest of the island. From this fortified outpost, they sought to dominate regional trade, particularly the lucrative exchange of Chinese silk for Japanese silver. The Dutch were not just traders, they were colonizers. They established a system of governance, imposed taxes, and sought to convert the local population to Christianity. Not to be outdone, the Spanish arrived in the north of Taiwan just 2 years later, in 1626. They established a settlement in Keelung, building Fort San Salvador, and later expanded their presence to Tamsui. For a brief period, the island was divided between two competing European powers. The Spanish presence, however, was less secure. Plagued by disease, resistance from local tribes, and logistical challenges, by 1642, the Dutch had successfully driven the Spanish from the island, unifying it under their control. The Dutch presence accelerated the migration of Han Chinese settlers, who were brought in to farm the land and increase agricultural production. The story of Taiwan is not simply a chronicle of foreign powers imposing their will upon a passive island. It is, above all, a story of remarkable resilience, adaptation, and transformation. Throughout its history, the people of Taiwan have navigated the turbulent currents of change, absorbing new influences while fiercely preserving their own unique identity. The central theme of this essay is a single, pivotal moment, a hypothetical 30 minutes that changed a nation. This concept serves as a powerful metaphor for the critical turning points that have dramatically altered the island's destiny. The year 1661 marked a dramatic and violent turning point for Taiwan. This challenge came in the form of Zheng Chenggong, better known to the West as Koxinga. He was the son of a Chinese pirate merchant and a Japanese mother, a formidable military leader who commanded immense loyalty. Koxinga laid siege to the fortress, beginning a long and grueling standoff that would last for 9 months. On February 1, 1662, the Dutch signed a treaty. After 38 years, the Dutch colonial era in Taiwan came to an end. After ousting the Dutch, Koxinga established his own administration on Taiwan, which he renamed Tungning, the eastern capital. To achieve this, Koxinga and his successors implemented a system of military agriculture known as the Tunshin system. In 1683 he appointed Admiral Shi Lang to lead a massive naval expedition to conquer Taiwan. Qing forces officially took control of Taiwan, formally incorporated into the Chinese Empire as a prefecture of Fujian province. The Qing government's attempts to restrict migration to Taiwan were, in the long run, a complete failure. This steady stream of illegal migrants quickly turned into a flood. The process of opening the frontier was not a peaceful one. Their expansion inevitably brought them into direct and often violent conflict with the indigenous peoples. Amidst this turmoil, the Han settlers worked to build a new society. These temples became the centers of social and economic life. The year 1895 brought another sudden and dramatic shift. The Qing government agreed to cede territory to Japan. Their island was handed over to Japanese control in perpetuity. In a desperate act of self-preservation, a group of local gentry and Qing officials declared their independence. They established the Republic of Formosa. Just days after the republic was declared, a Japanese invasion force landed on the northern coast near Keelung. The resistance was fierce but ultimately futile. The first few years of Japanese rule were marked by widespread resistance and violent suppression. The Japanese responded with overwhelming force. Once security was established, the Japanese colonial government embarked on an ambitious and systematic project to modernize Taiwan. This infrastructure boom was accompanied by a major effort to improve public health and sanitation. Education was the primary tool of this assimilation policy. All instruction was in Japanese, and students were forbidden from speaking their native languages at school. The Japanization campaign extended far beyond the classroom. People were pushed to speak Japanese in their daily lives, and to adopt Japanese customs. The memory of military brutality, particularly during events like the Wuxi incident of 1930, where indigenous people were massacred, left a legacy of trauma. The 50 years of Japanese rule ended as abruptly as they began. With Japan's defeat in World War II in 1945, Taiwan was handed over to the Republic of China. For many Taiwanese people, the news was met with a sense of cautious optimism and celebration. They anticipated being welcomed as fellow countrymen. However, this initial euphoria quickly began to fade. The KMT officials and soldiers who arrived were a stark disappointment. The new KMT administration was plagued by corruption and cronyism. The economy, which had been stable under the Japanese, spiraled into chaos. The simmering tensions finally erupted on February 27, 1947. In the ensuing argument, the agent struck the woman on the head with his pistol. The following day, February 28, massive protests broke out across Taipei and soon spread to the entire island. On March 8, elite KMT troops arrived. They were not sent to restore order, but to exact a brutal and bloody revenge. What followed was a systematic massacre. The ensuing slaughter became known as the 228 incident. The KMT military targeted the Taiwanese elite. The goal was to eliminate an entire generation of Taiwanese leadership. By 1949, the communists had conquered the mainland. Faced with total defeat, Chiang Kai-shek made a fateful decision. He would retreat to the island of Taiwan. In 1949, Chiang Kai-shek's government declared martial law, plunging Taiwan into a dark period of political repression known as the White Terror. The key turning point came in 1971. The United Nations General Assembly passed Resolution 2758 and expelled the representatives of Chiang Kai-shek. By the 1970s, the first courageous cracks began to appear. These brave individuals operated outside the party structure, becoming known as the Dangwai. A pivotal and violent turning point for the movement came on December 10, 1979, with the Kaohsiung incident. The government hoped this would crush the movement for good, but their actions backfired spectacularly, turning the imprisoned leaders into martyrs and inspiring a new wave of activists. This change was driven by one man, Chiang Ching-kuo. He understood that the government's legitimacy depended on winning the support of the local Taiwanese population. In a historic decision, Chiang resisted the pressure. He chose not to crack down, effectively giving the green light for a competitive political system to emerge. Just a few months later, in 1987, President Chiang Ching-kuo declared that he would lift the martial law decree that had been in effect for 38 long and suffocating years. The most iconic of these moments was the Wild Lily student movement in 1990, demanding direct presidential elections and further democratic reforms. The culmination of this process came in 1996, with Taiwan's first-ever direct presidential election. In a powerful display of democratic resolve, the Taiwanese people overwhelmingly elected Lee Teng-hui. This process of identity building reached a new milestone in the year 2000. Chen Shui-bian won the presidency, ending more than 50 years of uninterrupted KMT rule. Today, in 2024, Taiwan stands proudly at a critical juncture, a beacon of liberal democracy, a global leader in the semiconductor industry, and a society celebrated for its progressive values. However, this success is shadowed by a persistent and formidable external threat. The People's Republic of China continues to view Taiwan as a renegade province. Beijing wields its immense economic and military power to isolate Taiwan internationally, and pressuring the few remaining countries to sever diplomatic ties. This requires a delicate balancing act, strengthening its defense capabilities and its alliances with other democracies. The journey has been long and arduous, creating a resilient and proud nation that stands as a beacon of freedom in Asia. The next 30 minutes in Taiwan's story could be its most critical yet, determining whether this unbreakable island can continue to shine as a bastion of freedom on its own terms.